In the major conflicts of the modern world,
Canadians fought against tyranny, oppression, hatred, and imperial aggression. Young men and women of all backgrounds signed up to fight on the front lines and contribute on all fronts.
Canadian soldiers joined great coalition armies, alliances forged through political pragmatism and historical circumstances.
Alliances were desperate in their attempts to defeat enemies that are greater than life, and occasionally,
while assessing the wreckage from all the wars, the members of these alliances representing humble nations
and grandiose empires found themselves navigating conversations concerned with shaping the future of freedom,
liberalism, and hope for a more cooperative and peaceful global community.
Canadians, through their sacrifices on the battlefields,
and work with diplomacy and peacekeeping, have often joined the conversation.
Over the past 125 years,
amidst epic contests between world powers, Canadians fought, died, helped define one another, and forged new national identities in our increasingly complex world.
World War I, the war fueled by imperial greed and unbridled nationalism, remains Canada's bloodiest and most gruesome war.
Unlike the previous South African War, where most Canadians died of disease, newer and more effective weapons became the main cause of casualties,
brutalizing infantry units and scarring landscapes in ways never before seen in history. During the Somme,
710 out of 780 people of Newfoundland and Labrador fell during their advance at Beaumont-Hamel.
This decimated an entire unit on the first day of a battle that would last over 4 months.
The Battle of the Somme would see over 24,000 Canadian casualties.
And future engagements would prove equally devastating.
And World War I would result in 172,000 Canadian casualties.
Casualties, a term that is often vague, accounting for the wounded, sick, captured, or killed.
Battle wounds would often maim soldiers and severely diminish their lives.
Out of more than 600,000 Canadians who participated in World War
I, over 60,000 died fighting, a fatality rate of 10%.
Overall, 16 million people would lose their lives
in World War I.
Some nations would see their pre-war populations reduced by 10%.
Ultimately, World War I did essentially nothing to quell geopolitical tensions.
And decades later, Canadians found themselves in an even more
deadly global conflict. World War II, often acknowledged as a just war, saw Canadians joining the fight against fascism and global conquest.
As Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan sought to conquer Europe and Asia, Canadians participated on all fronts.
World War II was fought in thousands of places, affecting countless lives, and grew to become
the biggest clash of ideologies, technology, tactics, and
manpower the world has ever seen.
Through it all, Canadians demonstrated an extraordinary commitment and bravery.
Deaths were always tragic and at times frustratingly needless.
In 1941, the Battle of Hong Kong, the Canadian force of roughly 2,000 suffered over 50% casualties,
with half of Canadian deaths occurring in Japanese POW camps.
On the other side of the world, the 1942 tragedy at Dieppe,
a failed effort to capture a German-occupied port, saw the Canadian invasion force of almost 5,000 suffered a casualty rate of over 60%.
With 916 soldiers killed in action, and over 1,900 becoming German prisoners of war.
As the war raged, cities burned and populations were terrorized.
Turning points led to the hope and eventual reality of defeating the Axis powers.
On June 6, 1944 D-Day, the Canadians successfully secured Juno Beach, and despite suffering 12,000 casualties, they managed to gain a foothold in Nazi-occupied Europe.
As Hitler's dreams of a 1,000-year Reich collapsed in the spring of 1945.
Due to the combined efforts of Allied forces, it was the Canadians who had liberated the Netherlands from the murderous grip of the Nazis.
Canadians' efforts in the Pacific and European theaters were important contributions to the Allied victory.
By the war's end, 45,000 Canadian soldiers had died in combat.
And the total Canadian casualties reached almost 100,000.
World War II took the lives of 75 million people.
3% of the global population. Marking a contrast with World War I,
where deaths were mostly military. The majority of deaths in World War II were civilian.
In the post-World War II era, a span of time hailed as the Long Peace due to the absence of warfare between major world powers,
Canadians continued to serve and sacrifice in regional conflicts.
Over 500 Canadians were killed in the Korean War, and over 150 died in the recent war in Afghanistan.
International peacekeeping efforts in places such as Lebanon, Rwanda, Somalia, and Egypt
have further demonstrated Canadian service and commitment toward combating injustices and maintaining stability in our fragile world.